together, we're going to talk about the basics of personal finance. And when I talk about personal finance, I'm talking about everything from just your spending habits to budgeting, even saving and debt management. So I think that right now, during these particular times or crazy times that we're all going through, I think this is a perfect time to talk about this. You know, the current economic situation that a lot of us are in, they're talking about, you know, we're all in this together, and it's really true. A lot of us are in this together right now, and we're all in almost in the same situation, but everybody's different in their own personal situation. And so hopefully today, when we talk a little bit about personal finance and money management, hopefully my goal is that you don't walk out of this presentation, you know, a financial expert, but I hope that you get at least one or two pieces of information that'll help you for your individual situation. So let me give you some facts. Okay, right now, 56% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. What does that mean? What does that look like? So it basically means that, you know, if I'll use myself as an example, if I get paid on the 1st and on the 15th of each month, that I get my paycheck on the 1st, by the time the 15th comes around, I'm already out of money and I'm waiting for that next paycheck to come so I can, you know, keep up with my life. And so living paycheck to paycheck causes a lot of stress and anxiety. And that's 56% of Americans are living like that right now. And on top of that, 40% of all Americans can't come up with $400 out of their savings account in case of an emergency. So think about that. You're already living paycheck to paycheck, and then your car breaks down. Now, you know, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're not going to have those $400 to pay for that, to repair your car. How are you going to get to work, right? So, and keep in mind, the crazy thing about this is these numbers, the 56%, which is more than half of all Americans, and 40%, which is almost half of all Americans, was pre-COVID-19. This is pre-quarantine and pre-people losing their jobs. So as you can probably imagine, you know, these numbers have gotten a lot higher. Now we have a person who's living paycheck to paycheck, has an emergency, and needs to come up with $400. Where do these people turn to? Where do they go? One of them could be their parents, right? But not everybody's parents are in the situation where they can help them. They might be going through the same thing, to be honest. So what are the other options that people might go to? Does anybody have any idea? What would be somewhere where people turn to get access to cash? How about credit cards? Good job. Was that Elizabeth? Nice. Yes, absolutely. Credit cards, right? First thing that they're going to turn to is they're going to pull out their credit cards and start maxing them out, start using them. Quick loans, Connie, exactly. Now, quick loans, that could be like what, payday loans, right? So you start using your credit cards. Once you max those out, then you might be able to go and get a quick payday loan. I'll give you some information here. So at SCE Federal Credit Union, we are a full service financial institution. And what that means is that we offer every service that any bank can offer you, but we're also a not-for-profit organization. But we offer all the same services as a bank. So one of those services is credit cards, right? On a credit card, our typical interest rate can range anywhere from 9% all the way as high as 18%, depending on your credit. But even that 18% to us is pretty high. At least we feel like it's pretty high. But there's other credit cards out there that, don't feel the same way. In fact, they feel like that's pretty low interest rate. And so there's some that you're going to run into that are, 25%, 36% interest rate. And the interest rate is what basically what you're having to pay to borrow that money. So that's pretty expensive way to use credit cards. But what about a payday loan? The interest rate, the average interest rate for a payday loan in California is 372%. There's a payday lender on every corner practically. People find it easy to turn to them. And it's really because they don't understand that there's other options for them. So those are some of the options that they turn to. So now, they're in a bad situation where they're living paycheck to paycheck. They need to come up with $400 for their emergency, and they start using out their credit cards and they get a payday lender. Now what happens? Now they're in trouble, right? They're either maxed out on their credit. So what can somebody do with that? So once you get to that point, a lot of times it's not easy to get yourself out. So it's really important, people, that you guys understand that proper money management skills are a must, okay, especially now. Okay, this situation has really forced people to look at their own personal finances and analyze their situation. And now it's just about doing the right things to prevent something like that from happening. Okay. So we're going to talk about the basics of personal finance today. And like I mentioned, when we talk about personal finance, I'm talking everything about, budgeting. The main important factors are budgeting, savings, debt management, and credit. So I don't expect you to come out of this presentation being an expert, right? And there's a lot of, when you talk about personal finance, there's a lot of elements to it. And you'll see here, money management, credit, and debt repayment, goal development is a big part of it as well. Credit report monitoring, saving. And then when you get into investing and tax planning and retirement planning, insurance coverage, those are all, it's great to know about it, but really, if you have just the basic knowledge, you can really put yourself on the path to getting some financial freedom. So don't worry so much about, being an expert in all these different facets. As long as you understand the basics, you'll be fine. So, how does somebody get into that situation that I talked about earlier, right? Where you don't have, but you're living paycheck to paycheck and you don't have money for an emergency. How does somebody get there? Everybody's different. And so there's, the same challenges that I have aren't going to be the same that, either Connie or Daniel has. So, let's talk about some of these obstacles, and, we can talk about how to overcome some of these obstacles. Like I said, they're not all going to, pertain to you, but as long as you're aware of what some of these challenges are, then you can take the steps to overcome those challenges. So one of those obstacles is lack of direction, okay? Having lack of direction inhibits action. So what do you do when you don't have any direction? What can you do? The easiest way is to have a goal, okay? Because if you don't have a goal, you don't know where you're going, and it makes it hard to know where to start, okay? So the best way to overcome this obstacle of direction is establishing a goal. And so I'll give you an example. It's easy for somebody to say, okay, well, I want to buy a car next year. Okay, well, that's a starting point. That's a good goal to have. But you got to make sure that you are really diligent about how you set up your goal, because just saying you want to buy a car is just a small portion of the planning stage. So, what would be better is if you say, okay, I want to buy a car in 6 months. Now you have a better understanding of what you need to do and for how long. So I'll do an easy one for you. I know you can't see my calculator, but so let's say my goal is to buy a vehicle, buy a car, but I'm not gonna. I want to buy it in 6 months, so I'm not going to be able to save up enough money to buy a whole car in 6 months, right? But I want to be able to put a nice down payment. So let's just say $2,000 in 6 months. That'll be able to give me a down payment on a used car, and I'll be fine. I'll be happy. So now something as simple as putting down 2,000 and you divide that by 6. So that's $334 a month. So if I save $334 a month, I know that in 6 months, if I'm focused and I keep up with saving that money, I'll have $2,000 and I'll have a down payment on a car. But I get paid every 2 weeks. Right? So instead of doing $334 a month, if I do it per paycheck, now it's only $167 a paycheck. So every time I get paid for the next 6 months, I'm putting away $167. And in 6 months, I'm going to have $2,000 for my down payment. So what did I just do? I got rid of that obstacle of lack of direction by doing what? Setting a goal. It's something as simple as that. Another challenge could be debt. If you already have debt, debt can be very, you talked about anxiety and anger and frustration and stress. Having debt can increase those emotions. A lot of times, when debt becomes overwhelming, it can cause depression. And when somebody's depressed, it manifests itself into other areas. It could be, you don't want to go to work. You can't get out of bed, so that it limits your ability to make money. And so the debt problem gets bigger and bigger. So, it can be depressing to even start a goal because it's so stressful. I'll give you an example. I recently had one of my members who attended one of my classes earlier this year. And, I talked about debt management, and she emailed me at that time. Actually, it was late last year. She emailed me and she said, hey, I have some debt that that I need help with. I'm looking into maybe consolidating, or I don't know what my options are. And so I was like, yeah, absolutely. Let's talk, let's schedule a meeting. And so, so I set up a meeting with her, and I was ready to talk to her and see what we can do to help. Well, long story short is she never showed up to the meeting, and I would email her and call her, and I wouldn't get any response back from her. Well, about 3 weeks ago, I got an email from her saying that, she apologized for basically just leaving me hanging, but also she mentioned that she wasn't ready to face her debt. It had gotten to a situation where she was just overwhelmed by how much she thought that she owed and what she had to do to get out of that situation that she thought she was in. And so instead of facing that, she kind of just shut down. And so she felt like she was at a point where she can now face her problems, and so we did, and we talked about it, and we ran her credit report, and we actually found out that she really didn't owe anything. And so that, that's a whole other story, but the thing about it, the point of that story was that she just felt so overwhelmed by her debt that she just shut down. And so that's a real thing. The other one, another challenge could be something that's a natural human tendency, right? Is procrastination. Um, it's the urge to put something off for another day. And so when you do that, it could be you're putting off setting a goal, um, or putting off talking to me about it, right? So that can just the thing with procrastination. It's not getting rid of your problem. You're just pushing it down the road. Eventually, you're going to have to deal with it. So procrastination is a big challenge and an obstacle for people. And then inflation could be another challenge as well. Inflation, for those of you who are not too familiar, the easy version to explain it is basically that the value of your dollar today is lower tomorrow. And so for somebody to overcome inflation, you need to put your money to work. And with that, I mean, like have it make more interest than what it's losing due to inflation. So those are some of the obstacles that people can have, and knowing what these obstacles are, it'll help you overcome some of these problems. Does anybody have any questions so far? Any comments? Okay. So we talked about some of the elements, right, of money management, and the first one was with money management was cash flow. So there you go. So one of these ways to manage your money with cash flow is by tracking your expenses. And one of the things that I like to do is whenever I even though I check my account online, I can see the transactions that are going through, but it doesn't always give me an accurate reflection of what my true balance is on my account. Because sometimes there could be a check that's pending out there that hasn't cleared. And so I think that my balance is a certain amount, but then I don't take into consideration that check's going to clear. And so it could cause problems. So one of the best ways to manage your money and to manage your cash flow is to keep a register, keep a log of everything that you're spending. One of the things that you can do as well, just to kind of track your money, is by keeping receipts of everything that you spend. So whenever you use your debit card, you ask for a receipt back, and what I do is I just stick that receipt in the back of my pocket. And at the end of each day, I pull out all those receipts, if I have any, and I'll add it up. And I'll compare that to my account and whatever else I choose to balance my account. And that's been really helpful. So money management is tracking your spending. You can create a spending plan. And really what a spending plan is, it's just another name for a budget. Okay. But budget sounds, to me, honestly, it just sounds very restrictive. So I like to call it a spending plan. Now, part of the services that I do a lot of one-on-one counseling sessions with our members. And so I'm able to sit down with somebody and work out a budget or a spending plan with them. So this is a very, very basic spending plan that I use. And it's really very simple. Unfortunately, for some reason, I don't know what I did wrong with it right now, and it's not letting me input any numbers on here. But just to give you an idea, so this is a great way to manage your money. When somebody thinks about a budget or a spending plan, they think about it in terms of, okay, this is how much I'm going to spend each month. But really, I mean, if you're looking at it in a monthly perspective, sometimes it's not the best way to do it. I find that breaking it down weekly has really made a big difference on how I spend my money. It keeps a closer track of how I'm spending it and where my money is going, and then how much I have left over. So just to kind of give you an idea, part of the services that I do is I work with our members and developing their own individual spending plan here. And I'll work through this with them. I'll help them fill it out. And then we can develop a plan and a goal to put into effect. So this is a great way to do it. I'd be more than happy to share this with everybody attending today. At the end, when we allow some time for Q&A, make sure you email me or you put on the chat your email address. You can send it directly to me, and I'll be happy to send this spreadsheet over to you so you can take a look at it. So that's just to give you an idea, but it basically, you put in your deposits, some of your bills, and then it kind of just works itself out like this. And then, yeah, it's a neat tool. So credit, let's talk about credit. One of the things with credit cards and just credit in general, people used to look at credit basically as a way to buy something that they couldn't afford at that time. Okay? And that's like the worst way to look at credit. At least I think so. Because really credit nowadays should be used as a tool. And it's a tool to prove to, other entities or parties that you are fiscally responsible. Okay, that you know how to manage your money and you manage your credit wisely. It really shouldn't be used as a way to buy something you can't afford, because honestly, if you can't afford it at that time, then yeah, it probably shouldn't be put on credit. But use credit wisely. If you can, if you do have debt, if you do have credit cards, we always recommend that you pay off more than just the minimum balance each month. If you can pay off the whole thing, great. If you can't, that's fine. But as long as you pay a little bit more than just your minimum payment, that's going to do two things. Number one, it's going to allow you to get rid of your debt faster, and you pay less interest in the long run. And number two, it's really going to help increase your credit score, increase your credit standing. So definitely always recommend you pay off your balances if you can each month, or at least pay more than just the minimum. Always make sure you pay on time as well. I'm not sure if it's on this presentation, but one of the so the way organizations determine your credit score, and by organizations I mean like Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. Those are the three credit bureaus that calculate the information that's given to them by these lenders, and then they formulate a credit score for you. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's called the FICO score. And the way they determine that is they have a formula. The biggest portion of that formula, 35% of that, is how do you pay your bills? Do you pay them on time or not? So having one late payment on one account can have a huge factor can cause a lot of damage to your FICO score. In fact, it'll be 35% of your FICO score. So just having one late payment can cause a lot of problems for you. So always make sure you pay your credit cards on time. Okay. If you can, look for cards with low interest rates. Make sure that they don't have an annual fee. And also, well, don't worry about the grace periods. If you're paying on time, then you don't even worry about the grace period. But as long as you find one that has a low interest rate and no annual fee, I think you'll be okay. One of the things that I always recommend is that if you have a current credit card that has, I don't know, let's say Target, for example, I think their interest rate is around 26%. Look for credit cards that perhaps they have like a 12 months, 0% interest. And what you can do is what's called a balance transfer. And so you would apply for that credit card, and if you get approved, you would transfer that balance from Target. And now you're paying back that same amount of debt, but at 0%. And you can do it for 12 months or however long that period is. So do some research, look out for different organizations out there. I know with the credit union, we have certain promotions with credit cards, so definitely encourage you to look at your options. So and we talked about with credit cards, having debt. So there's also a difference between good debt and bad debt. So, I mentioned balance transfers. One thing to stay away from though is doing too many balance transfers, right? If you do it once, maybe twice, that's okay because you're saving money, and as long as you're paying it off and not, racking up that debt again, then you're okay. But what you want to stay away from is doing one balance transfer after another, after another, after another, just to get that 0%. Because essentially you're not paying off your debt. What's happening is you're just moving it around. And it's the more you open up credit cards, that can have a bad effect on your credit as well. Also an example of having good debt versus bad debt. Real estate can be good debt, okay? Even though it's one of the highest amount of debt you're ever gonna do in your life, probably the biggest, it's also a debt that's gonna turn into an asset later on. So that's kind of an example of what good debt is. Bad debt, for example, would be if you were to start using credit cards to pay for stuff that you would normally buy in cash. So like, for example, if you if you go to eat often, I'll use myself as an example. I eat almost practically out every day. So instead of paying cash for it, if I were to start putting credit cards, let's say, whatever restaurant I'm going to, I start putting it on credit cards, that could be a sign of bad debt problem, because now I'm not just paying whatever I paid for that meal, but I'm also paying interest on it later on that month. So it's good to be aware what good debt and bad debt is. So any questions so far? All right. So one of the warning signs that you might be having a little bit of credit problems is if you find yourself paying only the minimum, right? If you're not able to come up with a little bit more than just the minimum, if you're having trouble just making the minimum payment or not making the payment on time, those are warning signs that you might be running into credit problems. Not knowing what your balances are. I gave you a quick story about that member that she wasn't ready to talk about her debt. Well, what happened is that once I ran her credit, it turns out that she hadn't run her credit in a long time, and so she didn't realize that she actually had no debt. The only debt that she had was some student loans. And so because whenever she would run her credit, there was no credit score, she thought she had, credit problems, which truly wasn't the case. She just didn't know what her balances were. And so, not knowing what you have could cause a problem. So I always recommend, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, but if you can, always request your credit report once a year. Everybody has the ability to request their free credit report once a year without it having any negative effect on their credit. So I highly recommend everybody do that. And I'll give you the website that you can go to do that. But it's definitely important to know what you owe and what you have out there. Okay? And then, having going over your limits or getting late fees, those are some warning signs as well. The reason why I wanted to share these warning signs with you guys is because a lot of times when somebody is in the middle and they're of a situation and they're kind of going through some credit problems, a lot of times they're so worried about, making the payments or just kind of being able to survive that situation at that time that they don't see from an outside perspective what's happening. And so at least by you guys knowing what some of these warning signs are, if you or someone you recognize some of these signs, then it might be a good opportunity for you to talk to somebody or have them talk to somebody. Okay. All right, so we talked about goal development. You know, the 6 months that I talked about for a down payment on a car, that would be considered a very short-term goal. But you know, it's always good when you develop a goal, develop a plan, and the most important thing is to have a time frame for it, because having a time frame is going to allow you to calculate what you need to do and for how long. Yeah. Credit reporting. So with credit reports, you have the ability to review all your 3 credit reports from the 3 credit bureaus. If you see that you pull your credit report and you see information that's not accurate on there, you have the right to dispute that information and have it taken off. So definitely recommend that you access your credit reports, and not just so that you know how much you owe out there, but also, you know, God forbid, you know, I've been in this business for 22 years now, 23 years now. And I have seen, unfortunately, a lot of situations where people's identity has been stolen. And so, you know, that's another reason why it's important that you guys review your credit report. You want to make sure that everything that's on there is yours. Savings. So savings is obviously a way to reach your goal, but the main thing that you want to do is make sure that you always pay yourself. Okay. And what I mean by that is, if you're developing your spending plan or your budget and you're listing all your debts on there that you want to pay off, that's great, but you always want to make sure that you put yourself as one of those debts, for example, right? You want to make sure that you pay yourself. Even if it's something small, like $5 a week or whatever you can afford, but the important thing is to pay yourself first. And there's ways you can do it that'll make it easier for you. If you're working, you can have a direct deposit or a payroll deduction, where it's not necessarily your whole direct deposit going into a savings account, but you can split off a little amount to go into a savings account each paycheck. That's a great way to set up a savings account and it be saving money automatically for you. Another good tip is, if you're working and you're doing okay with how much you're making, if you get a raise, whatever that raise is, $5 a week or $50 a month, put that away. Put that extra $50 into that savings account. And it's a great way to increase your savings automatically. Increase, when you're battling, you remember we talked about inflation, how the value of your dollar isn't worth it's not worth tomorrow what it is today. Well, if you are saving more and more of your raises, then that's a good way to battle that. Okay, and establish an emergency account. We talked about people who can't come up with the $400 in case of an emergency. One of the first things you want to do is develop a savings account. I know that there's a rule of thumb out there that they say that people should have at least 3 to 6 months worth of expenses as an emergency. And although that would be great, I know that truly that's not reality. Sometimes it's hard, but it is doable. And you have to take the first step in doing that, and that's by paying yourself first. So each person is different. Well, my monthly expenses aren't going to be the same as my brother's. So everybody's going to have a different goal in mind for their emergency account, but the important thing is that you're well on your way by starting today. And with the investing and the tax planning, this is something that the more you get into your personal finances, the more you can come to understand. For something like this, I would recommend that you sit down and you talk to somebody if you want to start looking into investing or even retirement. Um, One of the quick ways you can start a retirement plan is, ask your employer if they have a 401k or 403b plan. That's a great way to put money away, which is non-taxed, and it goes towards your retirement. So also credit unions and banks, so they offer IRAs, which are individual retirement accounts, and that's if in case your company doesn't offer 401ks, you can have that option as well. And then there's other IRAs as well that you can access. All right. And then insurance, always want to make sure that you have insurance to protect yourself and your assets. If you have a family, you want to make sure that if, God forbid, something were to happen to you or your spouse, that there's enough insurance to cover whatever debt is going to be left behind for your spouse. So again, everybody's going to be different, so my recommendation is talk to a financial consultant or give me a call. So final thoughts. So just when you set your goal, set a realistic goal. If you said something like, hey, I want to buy a house in 2 years, that might not be a very realistic goal. So it's really important that if you do set something like that, you understand that if you don't hit it, you can't just give up. You have to set a realistic goal so that you can stay on track. And even short-term goals are a great way to kind of build momentum into the long-term goals. And so set realistic goals for that. Embrace delayed gratification. So that's something that I preach to my daughters all the time. When we go somewhere and they want something right then and there, I tell them, okay, do you really want that? And at that moment, of course, they're going to really want that, right? But I tell them, okay, think about it, and we'll sleep on it. And tomorrow, if you still feel the same way, then we can talk about if we can get it for you. But if you can stop and think about something that you might want, a lot of times you're going to realize that you're okay without it. So live within your means. Don't spend everything you make. One of the major components of being financially healthy is not spending more than what you make every month, right? So that's living within your means, and don't spend everything. And more so than anything, be patient. Be patient, because somebody who gets themselves into financial problems isn't going to get out overnight. So the important thing is to take the right steps, talk to the right people, and be patient, because things will be okay.